Good morning.
Good morning.
So we've been doing conference report the last while, and last week we saw this little video called The Not So Little Church, which is really a very little church. When it comes right down to it, until you go to Nigeria, you realize there's like 1 million more people there who are part of this group. But in North America, it's a pretty small group. And so, the problem with any, or one of the realities of any small group is that, what can we do, really? And this is the problem of Jesus and his disciples and the feeding of the 5,000. But we need to start, I think, to understand this, the reality of what we can do with the David story, which is a horrible story, let's just admit it. It's a horrible story, and it almost feels awkward to read this in church. Like, what are we doing reading this horrible rape story in church? But it's part of the book. And often people say, well, this is a major turning point in David's life. That he's been the good king until this point, and suddenly, so we're going to blame the woman on this, right? Because it's all her fault that she changed him into something else. But the reality is that David's been a thug his entire life. It's basically who he is. And so his way of feeding people is to steal from somebody else. Now, he started out his life as a shepherd, and so he understood how this works, that you have little tiny sheep, and they grow up to big sheep, and then they make more sheep, and it's just a lot of work for not much, and all you get at the end of this is sheep. Right? And so he decides that, it's really much simpler if you just simply take it from everybody else. Right? So he, even before he became king, he was out in the wilderness, and basically he ran a protection racket. And he says, I'll come and quickly came to the farmer. He says, look, I'll keep you safe from other people, and all you have to do is feed me and my bunch of people. Right? So he did that with a bunch of farmers, and he was doing fine, and the farmers had less, but they were being protected, so it sort of worked. And then, so when the people wanted a king, the problem was that there were all of these groups around Israel that were raiding. So there's a lot of this thuggery going around. So there were the Philistines over there, and the Amorites over there, and the Ammonites over there, and everybody was kind of raiding in Israel, and Israel was a victim all the time. And they said, hey, look, why don't we get ourselves a king who can sort of organize us a little bit, and then we'll get ourselves a little bit of an army, we'll protect ourselves from these thugs around us. So, first Saul did some of this, and then David, who was even better at this because he was a more organized thug than Saul was, he succeeded in doing that. But he didn't stop there. Because he had this idea that, well, like they used to do it to us, let's go do it to them. So verse 1 of the chapter says, in the spring of the year, when kings go out to battle, right? So why does David go out to battle? Because it's spring. There's a reason to go to battle. But basically, he's again going to the Ammonites, or some other group, and saying, hey, look, I'm just going to come and wipe you all out, or, that would be counterproductive in the long run. Take all of your stuff and come home, right? And I will enrich myself off of you. And this is David doing this for. That's the question. For whom? Because it says all of Israel goes up, so everybody else is risking their lives, leaving their crops behind, leaving their farms behind, leaving their families behind, risking their lives to go raiding, really, in some other part of the world. And do they get any of the reward? We don't even know that. And David, who's supposed to be leading this, what's he doing? Sitting at home, right? Enjoying their wives while they're gone. So here's one way of you feed them. Right? Well, I'm not going to feed them so much as I'm going to feed me, and I'm going to let you do it for me. Well, that's not much of a story. It comes right down to it. It sounds very modern in a lot of ways, but it's not sort of where we want to be going as a church. The Elisha story is very different. So Elisha's story is also very much a feeding story, but it's a feeding story based on honor and sharing. So Elisha is the great prophet of God, And so some wealthy person, some larger farmer, wants to honor Elisha at harvest time. So he brings Elisha a bunch of stuff. And this story never made sense to me until I was in Ghana, and my students would, well, of course, that's what you do. Right? You have a lot of, you get a little bit wealthy, and you show up to church, and you bring a whole bunch of stuff. And it honors the church, it honors the pastor, and it honors you. And God is pleased, and you get even more. And this, my Ghanaian students here at this story, yeah, we do this all the time. Right? So you bring a lot of huge cows. Yeah, like we saw people bringing cows to church. Right? Or people bringing chickens to church. Just to, share the bounty. But Elisha, instead of keeping it to himself, he spreads it out before everybody. And then God makes it more. Right? A wonderful story in so many ways. Jesus, of course, cranks us up a lot. Right? Because it's not the wealthy man who brings a whole bunch of stuff, right? And then you share it with a couple hundred people and suddenly it's enough. Right? And so you start with 20 loaves and you end up with the equivalent of 40 loaves of bread, and it's it's a miracle that you can at least comprehend. But Jesus cranks this up to 5 loaves and 2 fish feeding 5,000 people. Way beyond, if you're trying to imagine the mechanics of this, the brain doesn't even really do that very well. It also means economically that it's not sustainable. Right? This is not the way we do things. Right? It'd be like, imagine that we all decided collectively we're all going to quit our jobs, except Tom. Because Tom can't stop anyway. Right? So Tom is going to keep working, and God is going to take Tom's salary and expand it so that we're all going to live like kings off of Tom's salary. Yeah, see? But I'm guessing we're not going to do that. Because I'm guessing we really, truly don't trust God enough to do that. Because it probably wouldn't work. It's not, right? This is not a story about a sustainable system. Jesus isn't saying, go there and do that. Right? Have a huge celebration, invite 5,000 of your best friends. As long as there's 5 loaves and 2 fish, don't worry, I got the rest of this. Right? That's not what the story is about. So you've got this really odd story, or wonderful story, about something that we believe happened. Maybe you don't, I don't know, but anyway, right? But the truth is, you're also quite convinced that it doesn't happen on an ongoing sort of basis. This is not the way the world works. And yet, this is a favorite story. People love this story. And I think we love this story because we sort of filter it through the Ephesians bit. Right? So the Ephesians, in one of the last verses that we read from Ephesians, in chapter 3, verse 20, it says, now him who is able by the power at work within us is able to accomplish abundantly far more than all we can ask or imagine. And in a lot of ways, this is the story of what we've been talking about, the Church of the Brethren, and so many other churches throughout the world in an ongoing way. Right? That you've got on-earth peace of 3 or 4 people, and that little bit of stuff that these 3 or 4 people do ends up being a lot of stuff that these 3 or 4 people do, along with a whole lot of other people that they drag into this, or who joyfully commit themselves to this, depending on the day. Because some days you got to drag your friends along to these things, and some days they joyfully come. Right? And the same is with the church in Nigeria, that we send them a tractor, but suddenly all this other stuff shows up. And they do this and they do that, and these huge things are happening. Or if you go on the table in the foyer there's the story of Heifer Project. And Heifer Project is this one person at the end of World War II who decided that he was, they were feeding all these people. He says, why don't we just send them a cow? right? Rather than sending all this milk all the time, we just send them a cow and you know, take care of itself. And you know, and this guy said, well, maybe you could do this again, and maybe we could try this. And suddenly, well, not suddenly, right? Slowly, over years, right? They have helped 31 million people. Right? So you have this one idea, you know, well, I'll just send a cow over there, one heifer, the heifer project. And suddenly, not suddenly, slowly, and right, but 31 million people affected by this work. And so we don't really believe that, you know, this whole feeding of the 5,000 is part of an ongoing process, and yet, turns out it sometimes is. We don't know the story of the other 5,000 things that people did that never got anywhere. Right? Maybe somebody else once said it after there, and that was it. Lots of people try things and they don't work. But the reality is that sometimes God takes these little things we do and expands them in ways that we may never ever see. So sometimes you go and you talk to somebody who's had a bad day. And all that results in that is that they have a good night's sleep. But do you know what a good night's sleep is worth to someone who hasn't had one in a while? I'm guessing there's some of you here who would pay a lot of money some days for a good night's sleep. It doesn't look like much, but no, a good night's sleep is worth a lot. And it also means that the next day this person is going to have a better day, and it's going to affect more people. These little tiny things we do, God takes them and makes them bigger. And this is the miracle of this many people who gather here on Sunday morning, and other people who gather, and thousands of others who don't gather anywhere but still are part of the work of God. And this is worth celebrating, this is worth rejoicing over, and this is worth continuing. Amen.